This weather, it's kind of clearing off today. It's supposed to get partly sunny, so it'll start drying out a little bit. But it reminded me back, it's been 30 more years ago, where we lived. The rancher in our area contacted us to feed his cows in the wintertime. He lived in a city quite a ways away, and he had a business there and lived in a pretty affluent neighborhood. But he would come down, and he would help too. He was a good worker. He was just a little bit older than me. But anyway, it started out with just feeding the cows through the winter, and it developed into a lot more. He had about 50 head, I believe. It was a little, maybe over a little. He had 2 bulls, and then the rest female cows, heifers. And he ended up buying more land, but he had about 150, 160 acres, and in that area there was a lot of grass, so it would run those cows real well.
And he raised his own grass, built his
Yeah,
own.
they were all grass fed, just hay, and we ended up we started feeding bahia grass. He bought it somewhere, and it had the seed in it, and it's similar to Bermuda grass, only it's a little bit tougher. And it reseeded in a good part of the place, took over in bahia grass, so we just started getting that baled. We didn't do the baling, we'd hire it done. But anyway, back to the weather and working cows. It's not quite as easy as the movies show. It's not bad, but sometimes it gets a little bit rough. It doesn't always go as easy as you'd think. We would, when we got into it pretty heavy, we would get the cows up in the spring and in the fall. In the spring, we'd get them up for vaccination and to look them over. I don't think we ever dehorned any. He didn't, for whatever reason, he didn't. I've done dehorning, and it's kind of hard to do. But anyway, we'd get them up in the spring, do the vaccinations, and then in the fall we'd get them up in the lot and separate the calves we're going to take to the sale, or he would usually take to the sale, but he'd always come down and help. And once you plan it to do it on a certain weekend, and that's usually when I try to do it, because he wanted to come down and help. You got to stay with it, no matter what the weather is. And where he lived, the neighborhood he lived, was pretty affluent people. It was people that worked in the office setting, most of them. But he would, it was kind of funny, he would tell them, yeah, you come down, we'll ride horses, and I got ponds to fish in, and we're going to do some work with the cows, and they would fall for it, but usually they never come back the second time, but because it was work. And one fella come down with him one year. I don't know what he done for a living, but you could see he was fresh out of an office. And it was a rainy weekend like this, only worse. It was stormy. And we were sitting and looking. We had been getting some up, but they were on spooky that weekend and hard to handle. We didn't have them all up, so we were just sitting on the back of the horses, deciding what we was going to do, how we was going to go about getting the rest of them in. I need to put some wood in that heater right quick. Want some?
No, I'll get enough.
No, you're not getting up in my lap now. Go on. Why don't you go chase a rabbit or something? Do a job. Anyway, this fellow that came down with him that weekend. He went back and told later the owner of the ranch, come back a few weeks later and told me about it. But anyway, this fellow went back to his neighborhood and told everybody that he was watching us sitting there on them horses, and it was thundering and raining. And we looked just determined to finish the job, and he thought to himself, boy, I'm in trouble now. But,
I can work them out in the rain.
you know, it wasn't real bad, but it was raining pretty good. But we had to get the job done. And another time, the owner was by himself. He didn't bring anybody down. He came down. It was in the fall of the year, I believe. And we had one old cow. She didn't have no horns. She's bald-faced heifer. But she was a little bit wild, and we was having trouble with her, trying to get her turned. And we was in a little lot at the far end of the place. And I don't know why he got down off his horse. We was just sitting there on the horses getting ready to move her. We had her hemmed in a little bit and just kind of coaxed her on up to the main lot. And he got down on his off his horse and was standing there by a little shed. And he was laughing because she was kind of pacing back and forth like she was going to charge me on my horse. And she turned around and she pinned him up against that shed, and she just took her head like that, just started working him over good. It didn't hurt him. He thought he thought he was going to die.
Oh my gosh.
But we finally got her. But things like that happen. It doesn't always, and loading them up in a trailer is sometimes hard. We had a good squeeze chute and good corrals. And we had one that came down with mastitis, and the calf died, and her bag was almost as long as that little stove there. It was great big, I remember. And we did call the vet out, and he gave her some shots, but it was going to take a while for it to take effect, and we had to, Susie and I had to,
Milked it.
we kept her up in the lot, and we had to milk her twice a day.
Oh.
And she was wild, real wild and surly. She didn't like to be messed with. So we'd put her up in a squeeze chute every morning and every evening and milk her down. And she hated that. She was kicking and jumping,
Yeah.
but we had her squeezed in where she couldn't go anywhere. And she had diarrhea, and she'd flip her tail, and the poop would go everywhere. And we finally got her milked down. After about a week, the medication took effect pretty good, and she turned out okay, but lost the calf. But the weather, gets, it kind of interferes with you, but you usually have to go ahead and get it done. And I know a fella out here, matter of fact, I bought a horse off of him a long time ago in a horse trailer. He was a bit older than me, and when he was a young man out here, his folks have a pretty good sized ranch up by the mountains. And they didn't have horse trailers. Well, he said they would saddle up from the house and ride to where the cows was at, and then have to work them. They'd take them to a corral, usually in a box canyon or something. So it was a lot harder back then, because nowadays you load your horse up in a trailer and you take it to the area where you're going to work, and it's a little bit easier. But a lot of things can go wrong doing that. And before we finished up doing that, in later years, Susie got a hold of two herding dogs. A fella gave them to us. He was having trouble. I forget what the problem was, but
Well, they were Australian Shepherds.
yeah, that's right. They were Australian Shepherds, and it was a brother and sister. Now that's what it is. The guy that had them, he would get dogs like that, and he'd bring them down. It was the guy that owned the ranch, actually, and he was always trading on stuff. And he brought those dogs down to his place one I believe Saturday or Sunday morning, and they got out of his vehicle. It was real pretty dogs, and they headed straight for the freshest cow manure they could find and rolled in it, and they just a mess. And he cleaned them up, or he's, and then he brought them to our house. He come over to the house and he said, "You guys want 2 dogs?" And of course, Susie, she'll take in dogs. And we took him. He just was mad, and he didn't, they were used to being in town, and a lot of dogs, that's what they'll do. They'll run and try to roll in the manure. But it turned out, she started working those cows with him, or started working at the cows. And after a while, we didn't need horses anymore. She would be on foot, and one of the dogs would, and there's 50 head of cattle too, good size bunch. One of the dogs would get behind, I think it was a female, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The female was more aggressive, and they a lot of times are on those herding dogs. And the male, or it was her brother, the male dog would get out to the side, and he'd keep them up against the fence, and they didn't run them. They just kind of trotted along and moved them up the fence, and she'd move that whole herd up the fence, along the fence, and right into the corral, just like Mary's little lambs.
No, they worked out real good.
And it was real easy to work them cows with those 2 dogs. They were good, and we had to move eventually. We moved back to the city to get a better paying job, and we put an advertisement in, and a guy that owned a dairy had a bunch of cows, dairy cows. We gave them to him, because that's where they needed to go, was to a place to work cows. And I guess that they got a good home. We hated to give them up, but we were moving to the city because of work, and it'd just be in the house all the time or in the yard.
I think they worked out real good on that farm.
Yeah, it seemed like he contacted us and said that they were just perfect for bringing his cows up. I don't know how many cows he had, but he had a dairy farm. But that was about the last of it. That when we done it for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, I guess.
Yeah.
And
worked with horses too.
Yeah. Well, at the end of it, before we left, he got into horses, kind of race horses. He was buying them somewhere. And he'd bring them down there to us, and we were breaking them for him. I didn't do that racing stuff. I never liked that. But we would, Susie would trailer break them.
Well, I break them babies too.
And she would break the babies, trailer break the babies when we'd wean them, the colts. And then we'd work them. After work of an evening, we'd go over and we had a big buckskin gelded, and he wanted me to work in them yearling colts to start getting them beefed up, and I kind of cheated a little bit on that. I'd tie all 3 of them with halter, with a lead rope on the back of that big buckskin, and force them colts. They were yearlings, just weaned. And they would, they'd dig their feet in for a little bit and didn't want to go, and I never did hurt them or, treat them bad, but finally they'd start trotting along behind him, and then after a while we'd go around this 50-acre place that we run them in. We would, I'd go around that once or twice, just letting them trot or walk fast, and then I'd put him into a short lope and work him like that. Then we had a round pen and a walker, and we'd cool them down on the walker, and or it was a round pen, and then we'd give them a bath, all of them a bath, and brush them down. Susie would brush them down and give them a bath. And it's funny, our kids were little; they weren't 5 years old, and in a area where the horses weren't. We'd just let them play out there in the area.
Well, they play on the walker.
And that's what they had done. We'd turn that walker on, And they'd, them two little girls, they'd go out there and grab a hold of them lead ropes on the walker, and it was like a merry-go-round, so it was good to keep them occupied.
Yeah.
But we took care of that for a few years, 2 or 3 years. It wasn't very much, and then that's when we had to move back to town or to this bigger city because of work. And them little towns, it's really hard to make a living. You know, a good wage in a lot of them, unless maybe if you're the owner's son, you know. But those are good memories, and we had a lot of friends back in that part of the country that showed us a lot of stuff, taught us a lot of stuff that older people that taught us a lot about canning and cows, horses. Good times.
Yeah, we was back in our 20s then.
Yeah, we were probably in our early to mid-20s and then getting close to 30.
Yeah.
So we had a couple of horses, a Palomino gelding that I rode most of the time, and we had another one. We bought it when it was about a 2-year-old. It's called a blue roan, if anybody knows. It's kind of a blackish silver horse, kind of a bluish color to him. But anyway, Susie, when it got of age, you know, we saddle broke it and she rode it. And where we lived, there was a lot of timber, and I would go down and cut firewood. And I didn't have a chainsaw for a long time. I had a bow saw, about this long, if anybody knows what a bow saw is. And that's what I had, and the trees that I was cutting was mostly red oak or pin oak, they call them both. About that big around, and use them for firewood. But she would come down sometimes if I was cutting wood, and she'd have one of the girls, the older one was still probably 4 years old.
Maybe, yeah.
And the other one was still in diapers, and she'd have one holding on the back saddle, and the other one, the baby, in her arms, and riding down. That horse was well broke. One time we had a mishap where
We did.
she rode up on me and I didn't see her coming, and I just fell in a tree, and it went down, and the horse, there's 3 human bodies went 3 different directions.
That crash scared that horse half to death.
And the horse bolted and jumped sideways, and everybody was okay. It turned out, you just have mishaps like that, you know,
Yeah.
you try to be careful. But and the horse was docile, because when she was younger, she trained him to, like you see in the movies, she'd put him in a certain spot, and she'd run and jump up on him from behind, and grab his rump and then scoot up on the saddle.
Like Annie Oakley.
Yeah, like Annie Oakley, and he was good about it. But we done a lot of horse work back then, and we didn't do hardly any just leisure riding. It was all work on the back of the horse. So that's about it. I just want to talk about how sometimes it can be hard to work them cattle. They don't always do what you want them to do. And you can get hurt.
Yeah.
So just thought, you know, I'll just pass along a little information. Thanks for watching,
From Out West Homestead.
and be safe.
Bye, everybody.